everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing very well today. So today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my top favorite eyeshadow palette from the year of 2023. And normally what I would have liked to have done is just lay out all of the palettes that I purchased this year and rank them or just kind of talk about them and share my favorites. But that is just too long. It's going to take too much mental capacity for me to do that. And so I just really liked this idea of pulling out my top 10 eyeshadow palettes that I purchased this year. What have I been loving? What are my favorites? And then sharing those with you. This is not going to be a ranking style video. This is really just going to be me talking about those favorites with you all. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so again, this is no particular order. These are just my top 10 palettes of the year. And this did not release in 2023, I don't believe, but I did purchase it this year. And it is the Wet n Wild Color Icon little eyeshadow palette in the shade Call Me Sunshine. I used this a lot this year. This is a palette that I was wanting to reach for pretty regularly. I love the color story. I love these mustardy tones, these more yellow tones. I really love this like duochrome shade right here. I think for a palette that's around $5 to have a duochrome is really, really impressive. So really loved this one. And again, I just really gravitated towards it a lot, which speaks a lot, right? That's really what dictates a favorite for me, is how often I was wanting to use the palette. So really enjoy the Wet n Wild Call Me Sunshine, and that was definitely a top palette of mine this year. Let's go ahead and stick with Wet n Wild since we already started. The Holiday Foxtrot, this is the Nutmeg Paws palette. I really enjoyed this one, and I think this was by far one of my favorites of the year. I just love the versatility within this palette, and I also love how they went festive, but it's still kind of neutral at the same time. So the look that I created, one of them I did where I did like the neutral eye look, and then I put this pop of green on the lower lash line, and the look came out really, really nice. So I was really impressed with the performance of this palette. And I also did use the pressed glitter one day, and I got a compliment on my eyeshadow, which says a lot. And she was absolutely just, she couldn't believe the fact that the eyeshadow palette I was wearing on my eyes that day was this one, because it's so affordable. So the Nutmeg Paws one, pick it up. I highly recommend. You are not going to be disappointed. This has a really, really good formula from Wet n Wild. Don't pick up the Jolly Berry Jumper one. I recently talked about how that's one of the worst things I've tried this year, but this one is that really good Wet n Wild formula. All right, so let's just go ahead and move on in with more affordable palettes, and the ColourPop 1111 eyeshadow palette. Some of you may have not even known that I picked this one up. I wasn't even planning on picking this one up, but I have a really hard time saying no to a neutral palette, and this one is so stunning. I love neutral palettes, and I really love affordable neutral palettes as well, and I felt like this one was a really, really good one from ColourPop. I really love that it's very neutral, right? You have some taupes in here. The browns that you have in here, they lean pretty neutral. They're not very warm tones. They're not super cool toned. And I also love that you have this like kind of like coral color, but it's not super bright. It still, again, leans very neutral. And yeah, I was really impressed with this one. I felt like this is that good ColourPop formula that we all love and expect when we purchase a ColourPop palette. I know sometimes the ColourPop formula can be kind of inconsistent in my opinion. I feel like over the years they've been a little bit more inconsistent with their palettes, but this one is one of their good ones. I highly recommend picking this one up. And this one is basically to be expected to be a dupe for the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. And so if you're not wanting to spend the money, or if you're not wanting to, you know, maybe just buy an eyeshadow palette that expensive, check this one out, and I think you'll be really pleased with it. All right, and something thing that I was really excited about this year was that I tried a lot of indie brands and I tried a lot of indie palettes and eyeshadow formulas. That was really fun for me this year. I really enjoyed checking out these new brands, and I always get excited trying something new because I feel like oftentimes I can just get kind of sucked into, you know, the brands that I'm always using. For instance, Natasha Denona, which is exciting, but I did use a lot of indie formulas this year as well. And one of my favorite palettes of this year by far was the Fantasy Cosmetica Druid palette. And I don't think this one released this year either. I think it may have released last year. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you know when this palette released, let me know, but I don't think it released this year. But I am so impressed with the formula from Fantasy Cosmetica. I also really like the price point. I think this palette was $30 something, which I don't feel like is that bad for the quality that you're getting in here. I feel like this is a very high performing palette. I definitely prefer the shimmer shades in here than I do the mattes, but the mattes do perform pretty well. And I just really love this neutral and green color story. I think it's really fun. I think it's kind of an elevated neutral palette, if you will, because you're getting color in here, but the color is a little bit understated and a little bit wearable, so you probably could still wear this every day if you wanted. But such a good formula, and I'm certainly going to be on the lookout for any other releases from Fantasy Cosmetica because I was so impressed with the Druid palette. So really happy to again test out some newer formulas, test out some new brands, and I think that that's always really fun to do. Speaking of a new brand to me, I did try Nomad Cosmetics and I purchased their Ghost Town USA palette. I love the shift that it has. I think that that's really fun, and this color story is so stunning. This was kind of like their Halloween release, and definitely you can see from the packaging, from the like the imprints of like what's in the shadows, you can definitely tell that it's a Halloween palette. But this color story, you can definitely wear this every day. Kind of similar to what I was saying about the Fantasy Cosmetica, these shadows are a little bit more understated. So yes, you're going to be playing around with color, but they're going to be a lot more approachable. They're going to be a lot more wearable. And I was really impressed with the formula in this palette. I haven't tried anything from Nomad. This is my first palette from them, but I have heard that their shadows can also be a little bit inconsistent, that some formulas are better than others. But for the most part, overall, most people are saying that this is really good Nomad formula. So I'm happy with that because obviously I wanted the first palette I purchased from them to be a good one, and I was really impressed with this. I really love the shimmers in here. I think those are my favorites in this palette. I've gotten compliments when wearing this palette as well, and I was like, yeah, it's this new palette that I'm trying. Like, I was really excited because again, it was a new brand, new formula to me, everything. So really impressed with the Ghost Town USA palette, and I'm really happy that I picked it up this year. All right, so let's go back to some mainstream brands here. Firstly, I think these are probably my favorite palettes of the year just because I use them so regularly. And they are the Urban Decay Moondust Shadow palettes. I'm counting these as one because I use them just about the same amount and I kind of view them the same. I honestly feel like they could have put both of these palettes into one and still made it a relatively small palette. That would have been awesome. But anyways, the first one that I picked up was the Moondust Space Rider palette. And I fell in love with this palette so much that I wanted to pick up the second one. And I just love how easy these shadows are to just throw on your lids, and it really does elevate your eye look. Really, I love the what was it, Space Rider one. Also in the Space Rider one, you have the infamous Space Cowboy shade, which is again very popular within their line. But I love like Star Cowgirl in the inner corner. I've done an entire eye look with Cosmic Space Dust, which is a more like taupey shimmery shade. I've thrown that all over the lid and called it a day. So yeah, I just love the versatility of these palettes. I love that you can use them as toppers, you can use them as one and done shadows, and then if you use them as one and done shadows, what I really like about them is that you still look like you put in a lot of effort because of the sparkle and the dimension that these shadows have. So that one is Space Rider. Then I have Galactic Cowgirl, and this is the more like silvery one, a little bit more cool tones leaning. And I picked this up after, of course, Space Rider, because I was enjoying that one so much that I was like, you know what, let's try this one out. And I'm glad I did. I do enjoy this one as well. I still think I prefer Space Rider more, but this one is nice. I like the silver in here. I also like this pinky shade. I think that's really pretty. So these are really good either on their own or as supplemental palettes, which is totally fine for me with that. But love these Moondust palettes from Urban Decay, and they were definitely a top for me this year. And my next palette, of course, you knew that I was going to mention the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. I'm so glad that she came out with a nude palette this year. She has neutrals, don't get me wrong, but I do feel like sometimes her palettes can pull either like rosy toned or peachy toned, and I truly feel that this one is pretty neutral. There's a lot of taupes in here. Of course, you're gonna have the really nice, just like kind of mid-toned browns, and this is a little bit more cool toned than warm toned for sure. But I will say you have to like taupes if you are interested in this palette, because it is very taupe heavy. But yes, really happy with this one. This is such a great everyday palette. Perfect for work, perfect for whenever you're not sure what you're going to be wearing that day or what you're going to be doing that day. This is great for that. So you guys know I love the Natasha Denona formula, and this is definitely just another hit in my opinion that she has come out with. Something else to note about these newer Natasha Denona palettes, especially this one, that she is really playing around with her shimmer formulas. Especially, for instance, in this palette, you have like Sheen, for instance, and Mia. So this one is Sheen and this one is Mia, and you can maybe tell that these are kind of more like toppery shades. Natasha Denona doesn't usually do that in her palettes, but that is something that I've noticed that she's done in this palette. So I don't know if she's going to continue doing that or not, but I like having the options. I love palettes where you have so much versatility when it comes to the textures and the formulas within a palette. That's honestly why Natasha Denona is one of my favorite brands when it comes to eyeshadow, because there's so many different textures and formulas to play around with within her palettes. For instance, you have the cream to powder formulas, you have the shimmer formulas, you have the more like creamy type of shadows in here. You have, of course, now the topper shades that you can play around with, and then you have the standard mattes and the standard shimmers. So many different textures and formulas in her palettes, and I find that makes it a joy to play around with and makes it just even more fun to have in your collection, and it makes it a little bit more versatile as well. So happy with this palette, so glad that she came out with this. I'm seriously so excited to see what she comes out with every single year. So this was definitely a hit for me. Now the rest of my palettes are all indie palettes. I'm telling you, I really dabbled into indie makeup this year, and I'm so happy with that. Sydney Grace has been a brand that I've just enjoyed so much this year. I have always really liked their eyeshadow formula, but I never really felt like there was a palette that I just loved. And then I picked up the Love's Journey from them. Such a stunning palette. And I've said this before, that this color story just looks very dull and underwhelming, but once you get this on your eyes, it seriously looks so beautiful and so stunning on the lids. I thoroughly enjoy the Sydney Grace formula. I love how blendable the mattes are, how pigmented they are. And then these shimmer shades, they're not like typical indie eyeshadow shimmer shades, if you know what I mean. I feel like where indie shines is they have the most sparkly, the most dimensional shimmer shades. Sydney Grace does not do that. Their shimmer shades are very foiled and very pigmented, but they're so smooth on the eyes. There's no pieciness to them. There's no sparkle to them. There's no like toppery type of texture to them. They are just strictly a shimmer shade, but I think that's what makes this formula so beautiful and so unique, because a lot of brands are now going in that direction. And while I love that, I love shimmer shades like that, I do feel like some people really just love a traditional shimmer shade. That's still not going to be underwhelming. It's still going to be very impactful, very, very pigmented, but it's going to look very nice and smooth on your eyes. And I love that effect on the eyes. Sometimes you just want something that's just going to make you look elegant, you know? And I feel like Sydney Grace, their formula really does do that. Then I have the Simply Posh Cosmetics palette, and Simply Posh Cosmetics is another indie brand, and they're actually based in Texas, which is really exciting because if you guys don't know, I do live in Texas. I live in San Antonio. I'm a native Texan. I've always lived here, and so I often feel like so many brands are from either California or maybe different parts of the US, but having a brand that makes their stuff in Texas is really exciting because, again, it just makes me even more happy to support them. And Simply Posh Cosmetics came out with their Cozy Cabin eyeshadow palette, and wow, was I blown away completely by this palette. I cannot get enough of this one. I love, love, love the shimmer shades. Clearly that's where this palette shines, but I also think the formula is so good. What I had done with this palette is I did a halo eye and I loved it. I loved the way that it looked. I feel like the shimmer shades, they just sing on the eyelids. These are multi-chromes, I believe. They could be duochromes. I have a hard time figuring out what's duochrome and what's multi-chrome, but I believe these are multi-chrome because they are very, very multi-dimensional on the eyes. And I was just so impressed with this formula. I was so impressed with this palette. I got compliments both times when I wore this eyeshadow palette, which definitely says something because I wear a lot of makeup. I wear different eyeshadow palettes all the time, and for me to get a compliment each time I've worn this palette really does say a lot. So I love this formula. I'm seriously so excited to just be on the lookout for what they're coming out next. I saw that they came out with the Aurora Lights palette. I thought it was stunning. I actually thought I was going to buy it because I was so impressed with this one, but I decided not to because I just don't think I'll wear those colors enough. But definitely kind of similar to like what I was saying about the Nomad Cosmetics palette. I feel like these colors are still a little bit more subdued and understated. So again, they just look a little bit more approachable on the eyes. So really impressed with Simply Posh Cosmetics and really love this palette. All right, and the last palette, the 10th palette, again, these were not ranked, these were just my top 10 palettes of the year. And I went ahead and picked up the Oden's Eye Merry Christmas palette. And they released this last year. I did miss out on it, but I picked it up the moment I heard that it was going to be available. I snagged it, and I'm so glad that I did. First off, look at this stunning, stunning packaging. Isn't it just so beautiful and so festive and cozy and warm? Everything, all of the feels that you feel around this time of year, I feel like is encompassed in this packaging. But then you look on the inside and just look at how stunning this palette is. I am seriously so excited to continue playing around with this palette. I'm going to wear this on Christmas Day 100% because why wouldn't you? It's literally called the Merry Christmas palette, and I'm so glad that I picked this up. Whenever I used this for the first time, I was blown away by my eyeshadow look, and I did get a compliment on this palette as well. So I am just so excited to have this in my collection. I'm so excited to play around with it, and it really just brings me joy because, again, I love Christmas. It's definitely one of my favorite seasons, one of my favorite holidays throughout the year, and I love what it means to me. I love just the warmth and coziness that I feel throughout this time of year, and I feel like this palette really just kind of amplifies that feeling. So those are my top 10 palettes of the year of 2023. What are your top favorite palettes this year? I would love to hear from you guys. Did you pick up any of these palettes this year? If so, did you love them just as much as I did? I really hope that you did. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, I would love for you to subscribe and be a part of my YouTube channel family here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will go ahead and see you in my next video. Bye!